So in this video, we'll be building a simple counter application which consists two buttons. And here, if you click on start, it should start the counter value. And on clicking of this stop button, it should stop this counter. And yeah, and when you again click on start, so this counter value should get restarted from the beginning. So let's just see the demo. Yeah, so this is the counter application which I have built. And if you click on this start button, you can see there is this counter value which is incrementing, and when you click on stop, so it stops incrementing. So again, if you click on start, it increments from the beginning. So yeah, so this is what we'll be building. Let's create a new project. Click on empty activity, and I'll give it a name as counter application. Okay, so I have created this new project. So let's do the UI part first. Go to the activity main, and here let me just close this, and let me remove this text view first. Okay, so first of all, I will take this text view, and add this constraint layout. And then let me add two buttons. I have added this a text view and these two buttons. So let me just add one more element which is called as switch over here. So I will explain it later why I have added it. Okay, so yeah, so let's give an ID to that. So for this text view, just give an ID of counter value, and for this two button, give it as start button and stop button, and we can change this text over here. And we can add one more simple text over here on the top. Just go to the code okay, so we can add a constraint to this. and for this you have one for switch also you can add. Okay, so now we have this basic layout design. So it consists of a simple text view and this one more text view, so where a value will go, like the incremented value will go here, and I have added this two button and a switch button over here. So yeah, so let's change this text over here. Okay, so to change this text view which is written over here, just go here, go to the code, and here you can, yeah, so here you can see Android text as this thing. So just take this and just add Android hint as whatever the value you want. So here I will give it as a counter value, and yeah, so okay, so we have finished the basic design. So let's start with the main activity. Okay, so after finishing the UI part, let's run our app and see. I have installed the app on my phone, and yeah, so this is what it will look like. And here we have not added any functionality to these buttons, so let's start doing that. So go to the main activity, and here we can create the objects for button. And then we have a text view. Okay, so here I have created this object, and in this program to build the counterpart we'll be using something called as threads. So let me just explain some basics about threads first. So here let's create a new function called as start thread. So this start thread function will consist of a normal for loop which will print the values from 0 to 9. And yeah, so here in order to see the uh, output, so you can just give like output on the console, you can just use something called as log d. So if you go here and if you do log d, you will get this method. So here you can see there is a message called as start thread, and in order to print the value of I, you can just concatenate the I value over here. And to remove this, just click on this and go to this. So click on that red thing, and here just give a value like thread, so it can be anything. Yeah, so we have created this method, so let's call this method somewhere. So I want to call this method when I click on the start button. So in the on create, so first let's find the button. So you can do find view by id and then go to id, and you have used the start button, and then assign it to the start button object. And here to this start button you can add a listener set on click, and here you can pass a new and then view. So you will get this thing view dot on click, just enter and you will get this method. So in this method I want to call this function start thread. So on click of the start I want to call the start thread method, so just give start thread. So let's just run this app and see. Okay, so I have installed the app on my phone, and in order to see this log message, you can go to this logcat which is over here, And here when you open this, so it will basically be in this, here you can see there is no filter, so it will be in this. And so you can change this to either show only selected applications, or you can apply the filters. So in order to apply the filter, go to this edit filter configuration, and here give a name as my filter. And then so here on the in the log tag field, so you can give the name as thread. So this thread name is basically the name which you had given here, right? So this same name you have given over here in the my filters. So in the my filters you are given the same name which you had mentioned. Okay, so when you click on this my filter, and then if you click on the start button, so here you can see the log message. So it's basically giving that start thread 0 and it's printing the I value. So start thread 1, 2, 3, like that. So the problem is, so when you click on the start, so it's basically printing all these values at once. So yeah, so it's printing all these values at once. So I don't want it to be printed like this. So like whenever it prints 0, I want to add a pause of 1 second, and then it should print 1, and again it should print 2, 3, like that. So in order to add that delay of 1 second, we can make use of threads. So you can take this message thread, and it's having a method called sleep. So this sleep basically takes in milliseconds as its parameter. So I want to add a delay of 1 second, so I will pass in 1000 milliseconds, and here you can see an error. So if you just surround it with try catch block, it can work. So yeah, so let's install this and see. Okay, so now I have installed the app. So let me clear this log first. And now if I click on start, so here you can see, so it's printing the value, but at the same time it's adding a delay of 1 second. Yeah, so it's not printing all the values instantaneously, so it's just uh, giving a pause of 1 second and then printing the value. So it's because, so here you can see we have used this thread method, right? So thread sleep for a 1 millisecond. Okay, so threads are nothing but the process which are running. For example, when you consider this app, so main activity is a process which is running. So when you start your app, right? So main activity is basically a thread itself. So here what you are doing is you are using this main activity thread, and you are adding a pause of 1 second after executing the statement. So it's like when you click on this start thread, so it will come over here, right? And in this, so it will print this message, and then it will stop the main activity for 1 second. After 1 second, again it will resume, and it will print this method. Again it will add a pause, and then again it will print. So this thing is basically in a loop until this condition becomes false, right? So that's how thread works. So now if you see the app, and if I see, I'm able to use the switch button, and I'm also able to click on this stop button. But I will go to this logcat and I will clear this, and if I start now, so here you can see this thing is running, but when it runs, I'm not able to access this switch, or I'm not able to access this stop. So but only after finishing this task I'm able to access this. But when I'm running this task, I'm not able to click on this button or use this button. So that should not happen, right? So for example, like when you're using Amazon app, so there if you search for the product, so basically you are typing something, and that thing is basically it is querying with the database which is present in the backend, and after some time you will get the information. But in that time, so like where like it goes to the where the request will go to the server and it will fetch the results. So there is some time gap, right? So in that time gap the app should not stop working. So you should be able to use the app uh, when it like when it's querying to the database, like, right? So now, but in this case, but in this counter application it's not happening. So why? Because, so here if you see, on click of this you are starting this thread, right? So this thread is started, but it will end only when this condition is false, correct? So until and unless this whole for loop is done executing, you are not able to do any other task with the app. So the problem is, like, you are using or you are using this function in this main thread itself, like you are using this main activity thread to do this method start thread, right? So you cannot access other methods which you are writing. For example, like you saw that when I click on the switch button, so it was not working because the whole thread or the whole main activity thread was entirely dedicated itself to perform this for loop, and only after finishing this for loop it was able to execute the other task, right? So that thing should not happen. So that's where the thread will come into picture. Like, we can use this thread class. So if you go here, so basically this is thread is basically a class. So you can use this thread class in order to create some new process. For example, now I want to implement this for loop in the background. Like, for that, you can create a new thread and you can run this method on that new thread, so that there is no connection between this main activity and this thread or the new thread which you have created. Okay, so let's start doing that thread part now. So what you can do is, uh, in the outside this on create method, so here you can create a new class called as new thread. So this is a class which you're creating, so it should extend this thread class which you saw there. So in this thread class there are a lot of methods, but you can find one method like void run. So let me just type it over here. So there is this void run method over here. So here what you need to do is, like, you have created this new class. So in the void run, so void run will basically tell what function needs to be executed. So now I want this entire for loop to be executed in the new thread, right? So I will replace this super method with this for loop or this task which I want to run on a separate thread, correct? So now we have created this new thread, so this thread is basically having this task. Okay, so now let me, okay, so now what should happen? So on click of this, start thread is called. So but in the start thread no function is no task is specified. So on click of the start thread I want to execute this function, right? So what I will do is I will create, so it's in this class, so I will create an object for this class. I will create a new object, and after creating, now I am able to access the method. Which method? So basically run method. So here what is it? Sorry, so you have to add this new. So yeah, so I have, okay, so I have used this object in order to call the run method, right? So here what happens is, if you do this, if you do like an object dot run, what happens is, so it will not start a new thread, it will start executing, or it will do this operation in the main thread itself. So in order to start a new thread, what you have to do is, you have to use this object, and instead of using run you have to use start. So now this start method, what it will do is, it will basically create a new thread, and after creating the new thread, automatically it will call the run method which is present in this thread. Okay, so that's why instead of using run, you have to use the start to create a new thread, and that thread will automatically call the run method. Okay, so Yeah, so now when we click on the button, start button, so it will call this start thread method. So start thread is basically here we are creating the object of this new thread which is extending this class, and that object we are using in order to call this function which we are using. Okay, so now let's run our app and see. Okay, so I have installed the app, so let's see that. I'll open the logcat also, and when I click on start, so here this process is running. At the same time, I'm able to access this button. I'm able to click on this switch also, right? Even if the process is running, I'm able to access this switch and all. So if I click on start, so now I'm able to do this. So because the thread is running on a separate thread, I mean this task is basically running on a separate thread. That's why I'm able to perform the operation. So this is the reason why thread plays an important role in Android development, because by creating this thread you are able to perform tasks on background or perform various tasks in background, and while keeping the application or the UI part running in the front. So your app will never crash if you do this, right? Okay, so now what I want is, let me close this. Okay, so now let's, okay, so here what I want is, like whenever the value of I reaches some reaches to some point, I want to display a message on UI, like I want to print something, I want to show something on the application. So let me just do a if condition. So if I value becomes 6, then what I want is I want, so we had this counter value, right? So counter value is basically this thing, so we have this thing, right? So like whenever the value of I becomes 6, I want to show something on this counter value. Okay, so to do that, okay, so to do that, go to this main activity, and in here if I value becomes 6, I will take this counter value and I will make the set text, and let me give some, okay, so this is some random string which I am giving. Okay, so now let's run this. Okay, so I have installed that, and when I, okay, so when I start the application, so what should happen is, see, here you can see what happened. So like whenever the I value becomes 6, so the app crashed, right? So the app stopped working, because now this entire process is running on a new thread, right? But the UI part, or the app which you are able to see on the front, is basically running on the main activity thread itself. So there is no connection between the thread which you have created, so this new thread, and this main activity thread which is running. So in order to add that connection, there is a new concept called as handler. So now we will see the handler methods and how we can communicate with this new thread and to the main activity thread. Okay, so now to communicate that, we will be using handler. So in order to do that, so I will declare a handler class over here. I am creating a new handler object, handler. So I have created this new object for handler. Now in order to communicate this main activity and this new thread, handler will basically provide some methods to do that communication. For example, like see here, when it reaches 6, so by using that handler, what we can do is we can tell the main activity thread that the value of I has reached 6, So now you can update the UI, right? So when it reaches the 6, I want to set the text of this counter value as something like I want to set it as this new value, it has reached the 6 value or something like that. So in order to add that communication, or in order to make that communication happen, so we are using the handler, and in that handler there is a method called post. So if you do this post, so here you can see there's a method post, which will basically return a message, right? So in that it will basically take a runnable and it will return a message. So let me just show you here. So you have this main handler object which is created for this handler. Okay, so go to this thing and here remove this and use the main handler object which you have created. In the main handler there is a method called post. So this post method will take a runnable as its parameter. So just give like new, and when you give like runnable run, and then you can see the first method. So just click on that, right? So if you go to this runnable, you can see that runnable is nothing but an interface. So interface is providing an abstract method void run. So now I have to implement this run method, like, so here if you go here, you are overriding the run method, and you are specifying what task has to be done or what message has to be sent. So in this case, when I value becomes 6, what I want is I want the counter value, or this I have this counter value object, right? So counter value, I have that text. So what I want is I want to take the counter value, and there I want to display a text as new value 6 or something like this, whatever text you want, right? Okay, so here just add a semicolon. Yeah, so okay, so now what happens is, so whenever the I value reaches 6, you have this main handler. Main handler is this object which you have created of handler. In that you are using this post method to start a new message, so which says that which will basically communicate this message to the main activity, that set the counter value to this new value. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so now I have installed the app. Let's open the logcat and this thing. Okay, so if I click on start, so when this reaches 6, so it should change the value over here. Okay, so there is some error. Okay, so here what happened is, yeah, so here you have not assigned a value to this counter value, so you have not basically did find your by ID. So let me do that, and you have this counter value, and let me run this app. Okay, so now if I clear this and if I do start, so when it reaches 6, so it should change this value to new value. And yeah, so when it reaches 6, so it has changed its value to new value 6. So this is what so handler issues for, so like communicating the message to from new thread or from the thread which you are creating to the main thread. So we are basically making use of this handler object. So yeah, so these are two basic things which we will be using in the app which we are building now. So let's start with that. Okay, so now you have this app. So here, so instead of this counter value, I want to display the actual digits like 1 2 3 and all this, right? So to do that, so instead of set text to this new value, I can make a new variable and I can display it over there. So I can use a new variable. So before that, let's declare a new variable called count. We should keep track of the values, and here in the for loop, you can increment the count by this count plus plus, and that count you can declare it over here. And you should remove this if condition, so because I don't want this. And yeah, so here set text is a string, so you have to convert this count value to a string. So you have to do something like string dot value of this count. So it will basically convert the int to string. And now here what is happening? So yeah, so it goes inside this for loop and it will increment the counter, and that counter is displayed over it. And this happens for only 9 times. Okay, so let's run. Okay, so when I click on start now, so see here the value is changing 1 2 3 4 5 6 and 7, and then okay, so it stops at 10, but I want it to be running until I click this stop button, right? So to do that, you need to have this stop button. Okay, so go inside this on create, and here outside this add a listener onto the stop button as well. So stop button, and there you are creating this new on listener, and on click of that, so it should stop working, right? So for that, what you can do is, again you can create a new variable to keep track of the state. So you can create a new boolean variable called as running, and you can initially set it to false. Okay, so yeah, so you can use this running over here. So now instead of this for loop, use a while loop. So inside this, pass the variable which you have created, running, and here, yeah, so now what happens is, so see, so when you click on the start button, so here when you click on the start button, what should happen is, so this running value is set to false, right? So what happens is, so the program logic will come over here and it will see this thread, and here, so it is basically running is declared as false. So while false, so it won't consider this entire logic, so it won't run this program, right? So it won't run this thread. So that's why, so when you click on the start button, you should declare this running value as true, right? And then, so now if you declare this, so it's not a class, okay. Okay, so on click of this, you have to declare it as running as true, and then, so this it will pass true over here. So this function gets executed only when running value is true. So when you click on this stop button, what should happen is, so the running value should be false. So when you click on the stop button, this running the value of this running variable will become false. That's why this loop won't get executed. And again, if you click on the start, the the value of the running will become true, and that's why this loop is true and it will execute this thread. So yeah, so let's run this. Okay, so I'm getting an error like counter keeps closing because mm, yeah, so I declared this stop button, but yeah, so I have not done this, right? So let me do that. Stop button equals to find view by id r.id dot, then stop button, and now if I close and if I run this, okay, so now the app is running. So let's start and see. So here the counter value is changing. So if I click on stop, it should stop. Yeah, so it has stopped incrementing. So now if I click on start, okay, so here it's starting from that point itself. So I want it to begin from 1 again. So let's stop this, and so like when I click on start, the counter value should get reset. So on the click of the start button, on click of this, the count value should become again 0, and then from that it should, and from the value of 0 it should start again. And also let's increase the text size. So here you go to the code, and here if you see the, yeah, so this is the text view. So here just increase the text size to 30 dp or 40, and then can give a, instead of alignment, let's give gravity as center. Okay, so now when I run this, I have installed the app. So now if you, yeah, so now if I start, so the counter value is changing for every 1 second, and if I click on stop, so it's getting stopped, and again if I start, so it's resetting from, it's resetting itself and it's starting from the beginning. So yeah, so this was about the counter app. So the main thing is you should know about the threads and this handler function. So thread we are using mainly because to execute a new task on the background, and in order to communicate, like in order to establish a communication between this new task or a new thread which you have created and the already existing thread, so which is responsible for running the UI, you are using this handler. So a handler is basically acting as a communication medium between the new thread and the thread which you already have. So yeah, so this was the fifth lab program.